Rachel here, Treehouse Knits, episode 38. How are you all today? It's great to have you back. It's been a couple of weeks and I have quite a bit to show you and talk about. I have some answers to questions, some finished objects, work in progress. We'll talk a little machine knitting, a little spinning. We'll talk about my stitching and the knit crate that I got for January, as well as a couple of Instant Pot recipes that have been really, really good. So why don't we jump in and get started. Again, I'm Rachel. You can find me as Treehouse Knits on most of the socials. I have a Ravelry podcast page where you will find a thread for introductions. You can just let me know where you're from. I love to know where you're coming from. I put you on a podcast map that I've created, and I love how that's turned into an introductions. I read them all, and I just love to hear your background and your stories. There's also a thread on there for questions, so if you have any questions for me and Treehouse Knits, feel free to jot them down there and I will answer them either right then and there or on an upcoming podcast. So why don't we jump right in with the make-along that we're doing right now. We are doing the New to You make-along with several other podcasters out there, as well as Natalie from Remembrances Pottery, who we all know and love. She doesn't have a podcast, but nonetheless, we are a group that is putting on the New to You make-along. If you go to the hashtag NEWTOYOUMAL on Instagram, you can see tons of people who are trying new things to them. I have been doing some new spinning to me this week, and I will share with you a finished object, which is probably an elephant in the room right now, a little bit later, which was a new to me process of knitting. Let's jump right into questions, shall we? So Donna Radu had a question on the YouTube thread. How do you join your ribbing on your machine knit socks? Well, that's a great question, and I have not talked about that. If you haven't watched my podcast lately, for Christmas, I ended up machine knitting a bunch of tubes of socks, which included ribbing and the toe, and then I inserted the heel for the individual who chose the socks. So I put out like 20 some different pairs of socks out on a table, and I had my family and friends just pick socks from them, and then I put the heel in based on their shoe size. The basket kind of looked like this. These are some that I have left over from Christmas, and I pulled one out. I thought this would show up really well, just to kind of show you what I do. So they come out like this. This is a knit crate, Audine wools, sorry about that. I thought you'd be able to see it well on this one. But when they come off my machine, they look like this. So on the machine, you knit the ribbing flat, and then you bring the stitches around and knit in the round the stockinette all the way down to the end. This one I didn't put a toe in yet. Isn't that a cool yarn from Knit Crate? Anyway, so that leaves me with this opening that I need to close, and all I do is do the mattress stitch. So if you Google knitting mattress stitch, you will see tons of great tutorials on how to do that. What I usually do is if you pull apart a stockinette section of the ribbing, or a knit section of the ribbing, there'll be bars in the middle, and I just mattress up back and forth to the very top, and that's all I do. It's really, once you've done it once, it's really easy. Actually, I do it from the top down because I use the yarn, the tail of my project to do that, and then I just insert my needles. What I've found is that if I rip back 24 rounds, which when you are on a machine, it doesn't feel bad when you rip back 24 rounds, but if I rip back 24 rounds, first insert the needle in there, rip back 24 rounds, then I can knit a wedge toe, and that leaves me just enough yarn to insert the heel and knit a wedged heel in there. So anyway, what they end up looking like when they're done, I kind of package them up. This is a pair that I made for a friend of mine's husband. He picked these out, and I end up just putting my card in there and wrapping them with a little ribbon. And yeah, can't even really tell where you can if you really look, but isn't that cool how that ended up knitting up on the machine? But you can see there's my seam. But on this side, you know, can't really tell too much. So that's that for that question. Thanks for the question, Donna. Vengina asked, how many needles do I use when I use my machine? I use 64 needles or 64 stitches for basic socks for people, which is kind of interesting because when I hand knit, I usually do 68 or even 72, depending on how thin the yarn is. But I'm finding on the machine 68 is perfect for what I'm doing. When I learned how to knit on the machine, I followed a tutorial that was from some man. He sounded like he had a British accent, and he did 60 stitches, and it took about 15 minutes for my husband to try and put those on, and he got them on. But that's another episode back. I talked about that. Okay, one last question I had from several of you was, what was I wearing around my neck in the last episode? That was my machine knit scrappy cowl that I made. This I made on the machine just to kind of practice in the round knitting and changing color and that type of thing. And I used all scraps that I thought complemented each other. This one, it happens to be, what did I use? 70, yeah, I had 140 total stitches. So 70 on my front bed and 70 on my back bed. And just knit in the round a really long tube, and then I Kitchener stitched it somewhere. I don't even remember. I know it does show up a little bit because I messed up a tad on the Kitchener, but you wouldn't even notice it. So that's what I made on my machine and I was wearing last time. So speaking of my machine, why don't we talk about finished objects? What am I wearing today? I am wearing my ice fall sweater. I am thrilled with how it turned out. This sweater is by Tin Can Knits. It's in their latest book called Strange Brew. And this is their fingering weight version sweater. And it's supposed to look like stained glass. I ended up using this black color. Is supposed to be kind of like a chalkboard color I got from Blueprint. They were having a big sale on their materials section or yarns. And it is I have all the information on all the yarns on my project page. I talked about it last time, but check that out if you're interested in what yarns I used. I'm trying to remember what the black was, but I love it. It's a merino cashmere blend, Art Yarns, by Art Yarns. It worked so well on the machine. It slipped right through. It's amazing how, you know, different yarns do better on the machines. So what I ended up doing was knitting the tube and knitting the sleeves on my machine, and that gave me practice to make sleeves in the round with increasing. So I started at the bottom with this ribbing, very similar to my sock, where you knit the rib back and forth, and then I connected it all into the round, and at the end I ended up stitching up that cuff. And then every 6 rows I increased, and you can see my increases, well, probably not because it's black, but my increases are just like the pattern said, but I did it on the machine, and that was great practice. I also connected the arms and the body just the same way that the pattern said, but then I hand knit the rest of the sweater. So that's new to me. That is my first new to me new to you, I should say, mal project, and I look forward to making more of these in the future. It still took a long time, but certainly not as long as if I would have hand knit the whole thing. I mentioned last time the body on the sweater to knit took about 2.5 hours, and each sleeve took me about 1.5 hours. So it's still some time, but it just feels wonderful to be able to do what I love to do, which is the color work section hand knitting, and not have the kind of boring sleeve island kind of stuff, which sometimes I do like to do that, but it just feels nice to be able to combine the two. I occasionally watch a stitching podcast called Keep on Stitchin'. I think that's what it's called, with Pam and Steph. Just Keep Stitchin' is what it's called. And I love that when they have a finished object, when they've completed a project, they ring a little bell. And I would like to do that because I think when we finish projects, we should celebrate a little more than we do. And I have here a Liberty Bell replication. Of course, it's a what's the word? Replication? Anyway, I thought I would ring the bell when I have finished objects because my finished object has been liberated from the work in progress pile. So, happy finishes, everyone. All right, moving along. Let's talk next about a work in progress where I had a little snafu. My boundary bay. I decided that I did not like, now the boundary bay is a pattern that's by SPOUT Knits, and I'll insert a picture of it here. So you basically start the bottom band of it and then you pick up stitches on the side of the bottom band. I'm on the bottom band section and I was alternating sections with mohair, holding it with mohair and holding it without. And I felt like the mohair was dulling my yarn. So I ripped back everything and now I'm back to square one. But I like this fabric a lot better than what the fabric looked like with the mohair. But I wanted to talk a little bit about ripping back mohair. Have any of you had to rip back mohair? It was a pain even with it being held double with this yarn, this really smooth yarn. It was still a pain, and I ended up having to I'm looking that way because that's where the pile of it is. I ended up having to scrap some of it, and I have salvaged a little of it in case I need more, but I have a feeling it's all going in the garbage pile. Now, I didn't follow my own advice that I would give people when I worked in the yarn store that had mohair issues and they needed to rip back. I have never tried this, but I've been told that if you put it in the freezer, yes, put your project in the freezer, let it freeze, it will rip out a lot easier. So I thought I'd throw that out there. Have any of you done that? I probably should have tried that, but I was to the point where I just wanted to rip it out. I didn't like it and I just wanted to rip it out. So that's where I am with that particular work in progress. In the meantime, I was finding that after I finished this colorwork sweater and the yoke, I was having a lot of pain in my elbow and my wrist and my hands. So I decided to kind of step back from hand knitting for the last week and a half or so, which opened up me being able to do other creative things that I love. So I ended up working a bit. I wanted to work on my machine. I have a bunch of yarn now that I want to make into sweaters on my machine, but I didn't want to yet start a full-blown sweater on my machine. So I decided to knit up swatches from all of those yarns. So this is what my swatches look like for the different yarns. What I did is I started out with a ribbed cast on with just some scrap yarn. I did a little bit of ribbing and then I went right into stockinette, and every 20 rows I changed the needle size, or the tension size I should say, not the needle size. The needle sizes are all the same on a machine, but the tension is different. So I then ended up kind of cataloging what each of, oh that's a mess, what each of these yarns, what fabric I liked the best, what the gauge was for the stitch gauge and the row gauge. This is my Green Mountain weekend color, I think it was, that I'm thinking about using for a sweater. Look at the colors in that. It was just so fun to just pick up. This is Barrett Wool Co., the fingering weight. And this is all pre-washed. Well, this one's, no, I take that back. I actually did soak all these before I took the gauge. What am I saying? This is, oh, what's it called? The Blueprint Cloudborne fingering. Very lightweight, and that goes through the machine really well. This Green Mountain with the Tweety bits didn't go through as well. It was a little bit harder, but it did work, so I might play around with that a little bit more. This is the Mrs. Crosby Loves to Play colorway. Look at how gorgeous. I can't wait to do something with that in a sweater. And this is a Fiber Company. I can't remember it's their fingering weight though, with boy, it has, I should really have the names here. I do have the names. Sorry, this is Kelborn Woolens Andorra, which has all kinds of different fibers in it. And that knit up really well. So I'll either make a cardigan with these. I'd like to try a cardigan and do pieces. I would like to do another colorwork sweater. There's several colorwork sweaters out there that I'd love to. There's just I'm excited to keep moving on my knitting machine, and I just love combining the two, you know, the hand knitting with the machine knitting. I also knit up this hat. I didn't weave in the ends. The problem with, I really wanted a pattern where I could knit in the round a simple hat. The problem comes when it's the decreases on the top. Because I'm working with front and back needles, it's very hard to do that really cool decrease where you're decreasing every 6th stitch, then you're decreasing every 5th, and then 4th, and it kind of creates the swirl and just the really nice fitting top of the hat. So I found this pattern that uses 1x1 rib for the whole head, and then as you get to the top, you don't decrease the number of stitches, you decrease the tension or the gauge. And what that does is, in combination with the ribbing, it brings it together. And you know, when I think about it, that's how a lot of hats that you get off the rack are done, especially just cheap beanies. And if you put a pom-pom on the top, I think it would look really good. The problem with this is that my machine goes up to about a DK weight, and for Michigan, this single layer hat would do absolutely nothing in the winter. So I think the next time I do it, I'm just gonna knit a long tube with this done at both ends, and then I'll push in one end and make it a double. It'll be like a reversible hat and a double thickness hat. This yarn, I loved this yarn. It went so well through the machine. I think it's by Ellie and Ada. I got it last year. It was part of a kit, but it's beautifully dyed. Beautifully dyed. Okay, so that is it for machine knitting. Not being able to hand knit, or kind of putting myself on a little rest, allowed me to want to get back into a little spinning. So let me show you some of the spinning that I've done. So I went to my stash, and well, first of all, I decided that I wanted to try for a change. Instead of just spinning for spinning's sake, I wanted to start with the end in mind. And I remembered a while ago, I got this book, Yarn-A-Texture by Jillian Moreno. And really this book is meant for people who knit already, because you're starting with the end in mind. What kind of yarn do you want to create, and then how do you get to that point? So I decided that when I saw The Shift, I think that's what it's called, by Andrea Mowry, I'll put a picture of it in here. I thought right away that would be amazing for my hand spun yarn, because the sample is knit by, I'll put the name down here. Why can I not think of the name? Anyway, and the way that they spin up their yarn is similar to, I feel like their yarn looks like hand spun to me. And in fact, I think their business was all hand spun until recently when they got machinery. So I looked in my stash, and I already had this spun up from last year, and I love the colors in it, and I wanted to use it. I thought it'd be really fun in a shift cowl. It was Fiber by Esther's Place. It's merino. And I looked in my stash for something that might complement this bright color, and I found this. I'll put a picture of it right here. I forget when I got this yarn. I think I might have got, or this fiber, I might have gotten it from Rhinebeck. But it's by Into the World, and it's a Falkland. So I thought, yeah, let's try and spin up a different breed that I don't know about. Here's what I ended up getting. But before I spun it up, I referred to my Fleece and Fiber Source book. And in it, I went into the index, I looked up Falkland, and it took me to the section called What's in a Name. Many fiber names imply one thing but mean something else. Let's look at a few. The term Falkland refers to wool grown on the Falkland Islands off the coast of Argentina, but there isn't a Falkland breed of sheep. The Falkland Islands are home to a significant number of Coopworths, an Australian breed developed from a mix of 75% Merino and 25% Lincoln, and a fair number of purebred Merinos. There's also a strong history of Corriedales on the island, as well as some Romney in the background. Falkland shepherds manage their flocks to produce increasingly heavy clips of ever finer, high-quality fibers with low amounts of vegetable matter. Even though there is no specific breed name applied to their results, their work and the overall quality of the wool is exceptional. Now, this was also interesting. There are no known sheep diseases on the island, so the living animals don't go through the chemical dipping that occurs in the other areas of the world to control pests. This and the island's climate, which minimizes bacteria and other factors that can shift wool color, may explain why the fleece from the Falkland Islands tends to be particularly white. Also, due to the cost of importing chemical fertilizers and herbicides, Falkland farmers never turned to the use of these additives. Thus, their wool meets organic standards. So I thought that was cool. I have to say the Falkland Island yarn that I had here, the fiber I should say, felt very much like merino. It felt like a merino top to me. It had a nice, I'd say maybe 3-inch staple length, and just a lot of the qualities of this particular yarn, which was merino top as well. So I came up, excuse me, I decided I wanted to do another 2-ply. It came out a bit thicker than this, and I think it's because I haven't spun in a while, but I'm really happy with the results, and I think it'll be really cool in the pattern. The pattern itself kind of lends itself to thick and thin as well, because it almost ends up looking woven, and I think it'll just be a nice texture element to the final piece. So I thought, since these are kind of more wild colors, I happen to have, let's see if you can see this well through, I happen to have this variegated set from Mountain Colors. I think it's, yeah, Mountain Colors hand painted yarns, perspectives, in their River Wash Sport, which is close enough to a DK. So I thought it'd be really cool to use this from beginning to end and get that shift in color as well. So I'm really excited to start this once my elbow and wrists feel a little bit better. And this will be another new to me, new to you Mal project. And I will hopefully share with you that on the next episode. So that's that spinning. Once I got done with that particular spin, I just felt like spinning some more. So I picked this out of my stash. I'll put a picture here. All right, so that particular fiber is from Hidden Valley Farm and Woolen Company in Wisconsin, and they are known for their Coopworth sheep, and that's the Coopworth breed. And so I wanted to look that up before I started spinning. It's so fun to research all these breeds and actually touch and feel them in the spinning. But Coopworth is named for Ian Coop, who was a college researcher in New Zealand then, and he was the guy that developed the breed in the 1950s using Border Leicesters and Romneys. Coopworths are known for high productivity. Coopworths can have differing types of fiber depending on where they're from. Although the fiber always has lengthy staples, luster, good crimp, modern feltability, and overall better suitability for outerwear and utility textiles than next to skin garments. And I kind of found that when I spun it up. Here are my bobbins. Bright colors, definitely bright colors. But I feel like this is a good fiber for a beginner. It was so springy, spongy. The staple length is longer, so it's really forgiving in the drafting. I didn't really have this fall apart at all, but it's just a really high crimp, squishy, spongy kind of fiber versus the merino and the Falkland that I spun up, which was also, it wasn't as springy. It was definitely shorter and staple length than this. I held my hands a little farther apart when I was drafting this because the staple length was longer. And because of this being a little easier to spin, I was really focused on consistency. So I feel like this is as consistent as I've ever been in the size of my plies. I look forward to making this into a 2-ply. And I feel like it's next to skin soft for me, but we'll see what the final yarn looks like. It might be fun to crochet it into a little basket for my desk. We'll see. Be fun pair of mittens, pair of slippers. But oh, it's so fun to spin up and then think about what to create with what you've spun. I like going both ways. All right, so that is my spinning. Let's switch gears completely. It's been a couple months since I talked about stitching. I got into stitching later in the year last year. I just felt the urge to pick up a cross stitch again. I hadn't cross stitched since I was a little, maybe a teenager. So let me show you where I'm at with my Silent Night cross stitch that I spoke about several episodes ago. Before I show you that, I picked up one of Opera Joe's from Stitching the High Note, Joanna, one of her project bags that she's creating for cross stitching with the front window in it. Very cool, kind of cross stitchy type pattern. When I saw it, I definitely wanted to pick up one of her bags and support Joanna in her new shop. Check her out. This is the pattern that I'm working on. It is Silent Night. I really love the church in that picture, in that stitch. And then here is where I am. If you'll recall, if you've been with me for a while, I picked a darker fabric because I wanted it to feel like it was a nighttime church service on Christmas Eve. And this is as far as I've gotten. The church is what I'm working on right now, and it takes about a strand of my floss to do a couple of rows. So it's a little tedious, but it's fun watching the church kind of develop. I'm also using a special hand-dyed floss there, which creates a really cool effect, making it look like maybe the stone front of a church. One thing I might try with this section, because I'm using so much of the same color, I heard someone preloading needles, so instead of having one needle going for the project and changing out every time you run out of floss, someone had said that they take 5 or 10 needles even, preload them with the floss, so that once they run out of a floss on one needle, instead of having to put the project down and re-floss and yada yada, they can just pick up their next needle and go. And I think that would be a really good way to do that. So I might try that. I do have several needles that I could do that with. Another tip I want to share with you is actually a tool that I found. It's from an Etsy shop called That's So Calico, and she also does have a floss tube. That's what stitchers call their YouTube videos, floss tubes. And she has created what she calls a BITSY bob. And what it is a way to manage and store your floss throughout the life of your project. So what it is this thing that you just open up. In this section, it's a snap now. She does have some that come with zippers now. I've seen. You can put all of your floss. And then this section is felted so that when you're working on, let's say that's that church section, I'm using 2 strands of a 6-ply floss. So when it comes off the floss, the original skein, there's 6 plies. I pull 2 plies out and then load that onto my needle, which leaves 4 plies. And so I just wind up those little plies into little circles and stick them on this felt, and they go nowhere. She's also included a little magnetic section. That's my little scissor there. You can put your needle there. It's just really handy to set next to you. Before I had this, I had floss everywhere in a plastic bag, and when I'd sit down to try and do my work, it would take me 5 minutes to get reorganized and figure out, I mean, some colors are so close and you're trying to see, you know, what color goes where. And this is just so much more organized. So check her out. That's So Calico on Etsy. She does have some in stock right now, and I know she very often puts new stuff in her shop. She has different sizes too. If you have a bigger project, she has bigger Bitsy Bobs. And she also has more of this felt that you can actually click in and create pages if you've got like multiple colors, like many colors in a project. Really cool invention that I wanted to share with you. So check that out. So that is my stitching that has been happening. Let's talk Knit Crate, shall we? Again, Knit Crate, I truly believe, has done a beautiful job for their January membership. 2 skeins of worsted weight yarn, and these are heavy skeins. There's 201 yards. These are almost, it's almost an Aran weight if you ask me. It came in 2 colors along with the booklet, which contains a really cool pattern that they offer to use with this yarn. This is the whiskey color in their ambient worsted 100% Peruvian Highland wool. When I looked up Peruvian Highland, I think I read that it is a mix of merino and Corriedale, or primarily Corriedale, and I love Corriedale. No wonder why I loved this yarn. It's so light, and it took the colors so beautifully. The feel is so nice. It's woolly wool, but it's soft next to skin. So I have nothing like that in my closet. That is so cute. It's like a muffler, an old-fashioned muffler. The other color that you could get is that really gorgeous rose color. And there's that cowl as well. So, I mean, not to sound like an infomercial, but for $24 to get, you know, the 2 skeins of high quality hand-dyed yarn and the booklet with all the patterns, Knit Crate to me is such a cool program. They have great yarns. My sock crate membership came. Look at that. Oh, I love that color. It's a robin's egg color. This is 80% Peruvian Highland wool, 20% nylon. So this is a Corriedale nylon. And it is called Robin's Promise. Again, came with the booklet. So I think it was $19.95 or something for the sock crate membership. And I loved using the sock crate. I showed you a couple, I think, just before. This is one of them. Gorgeous, gorgeous socks this created. I can't wait to run this one through my machine and see how it does. Now, my friend Shelly, I'll put her Instagram down below. She is actually knitting these socks, these exact socks, and they're gorgeous. So check out her Instagram and follow her progress on them. But that's the pattern that comes with your sock crate this month. So check it out. If you're interested, of course, I've got my link down below. Oops, I just hooked onto a needle on my knitting machine. Now I got a snag. If you're interested, I have 20% discount below if you use my code and my link. I mention that every time, but check them out. Cool, cool company. The last thing I wanted to share with you, I've had many Instant Pot successes in the last month, and I know many of you have Instant Pot, so I thought I'd throw this out there. I'm going to attach 2 recipes. One is for a chicken with garlic and honey. They call for, I think, thighs, but I just used cut up chicken breasts and cut down the thyme a little bit. But the sauce that goes in that, they're incredible. And then I had a cold the last couple of months. I'm still trying to get over it with this cough. But when I was in the darkest depths of my cold, I was just so in the mood for some hot sour soup from a Chinese restaurant, and the weather was terrible. We weren't going out for anything. So I looked up Instant Pot hot sour soup, and we happened to have most of the ingredients for it, and it turned out so good. So I'm going to insert that one as well for you down below. I think we've come to the end. I'm curious what you guys are working on, how you're doing. I love to read comments down below. It helps me feel connected to you and learn more about you guys. It's a big weekend in New York City this weekend with Vogue Knitting Live. I wish I could go. I look forward to seeing posts and hearing what people are doing at Vogue. Hopefully the weather will hold out and everybody will be able to get there. And yeah, other than that, we've had a lot of snow here, although today we got about I'd say 6 inches of snow was on our patio, and then it started to rain. So now we have this sloppy, gross mess. We had a 2-hour delay for one of my kids' schools. My high schooler had to go to school, so I got to go out into it and take him to school, which was fine. But yeah, other than that, I plan on heading to Ann Arbor in a few days with a couple of friends of mine, and I look forward to going to SPUN, the yarn store in Carytown there, and just shopping. I lived in Ann Arbor for 4 years doing my undergrad at University of Michigan, and I just love going back and checking out how things have changed and what's new. So that's coming up for me, and yeah, and then in a few weeks, my husband and I head to Napa Valley. He's got a conference there, so I said, oh, honey, I'll come along. So, of course, one of the first things I did was check out if there are any yarn stores, and there are. So, I don't know. Do I have any viewers from Napa? I think at one point I did. If you're from that area, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa, Northern California, I don't know, near San Francisco, but let me know where I should go, what I should do. Well, that's it from Treehouse Knits Central. I hope you have a great couple weeks of doing all the things that you love to do. We'll see you on the next episode of Treehouse Knits.